Hey everyone. Um, I talk a lot about rating lists. Um, I also rate players actually. But there was a following the last WTC, Russell Wright. He made a ranking of lists and players for us captains to sort of fill out, and um, I've been using that ranking ever since. So what I'm presenting to you today is not my own ranking system. It is heavily influenced by Russell Wright. But I wanted to show you what my thought process is when I rank a list, when I look at it and go through it. So I've made a little PowerPoint for that. It's my thing. Just a second. I will just set it up. Here we go. Might have been ready with this, right? I wasn't. Right. So this is my list rating system, and it is inspired by Russell Wright, so all credit due to him. And before I do any of this, I just want to put in some disclaimers because when you're rating lists, you're basically rating them on the premise of what do you think about this. Um, so it's highly subjective and therefore very, very suspect. You can't really use this system for anything objective in measuring out what lists are good or what lists will do well. I use it as a tool for that sort of when I am evaluating, when I'm predicting lists at tournaments, what lists will possibly do well. And my success rate is approximately 60%, which is also what, by the way, what Russell Wright's success rate was with list ratings. Um, he he figured out that you could from the WTC see what did people think of the lists, and 60% of those were spot on with where the list would end. Um, but what did people think of the players behind? And that was 80%. Right. So it's way easier to actually predict who will win if you're just looking at the players than it is if you're just looking at the lists. Um, which again means that this is highly suspect, right? It's not an accurate science in any sense of the word. Um, it also completely ignores people's different play styles. Some of the categories that I'm going to go through have certain builds attached to them, more or less, and that means that I am completely ignoring people who are very good at a certain type of playstyle at a certain build. Completely ignoring that. Don't care. I don't mind. Which again is a source of errors. It also assumes that I know that I know what's good, and I don't necessarily. I run this YouTube channel. I am a captain of the Danish WTC team. I've been to 2 WTCs. I've been to tournaments, lots of those. I've won a few. I am the current ruling Danish champion, but that doesn't mean I am infallible and all-knowing. It's just it assumes that I know, right? Um, and it's not especially useful in the pre-game position before a game. So I wouldn't use this as a tool going into a game because it's not very specific. It doesn't tell me how to play against a certain list, for instance, right? So I had one game recently as a warm-up to the last tournament I went to and won, um, where I was facing off against Steen, and he was bringing a list that I, just from looking at it, I thought, well, this is maybe a 2 um, on my scale here. So I wasn't really afraid of that list. It didn't really matter, and he absolutely trashed me. And I thought that I felt like I had a list that was possibly a fiver, right? Um, so so it's not very useful because I didn't deploy, I didn't move in the right way. I took chances that was stupid because I I just had rated his list as a possible 2. I can take this, and that was not true at all. He knew how to play it. So it's not useful for setting up your game. It's not useful for preparing for a game. Um, what it can do, though, is help build up a vocabulary among us here, the viewers, for how to speak about different lists, um, and maybe for how to mentally think about lists as well. So that was my disclaimers. Now, for the levels themselves, let's start with level 1, the bad. Level 1 lists are bad lists. They handicap the player. Um, and I see this from new players who maybe bought a starter box and just assemble that, not knowing anything about the game. Players who deliberately choose something that they like. So, like historical players, what some people despairingly call rivet counters, um, or players who love a certain unit or a certain like, and they want to play that no matter if it's good or bad. Um, these players will make mistakes in their lists, and they will use units that are bad in the game, that like very bad in the game. So you might take a unit such as the Goliath, the little rolling anti-tank drone, I guess you'd call it, um, or a Panther, which is way overcosted. Um, so there are certain units that are just they don't work in the rules. They don't really. You can't make them work either. And players who make bad lists choose bad units. They also typically choose bad nations that handicap them or that don't really benefit them in any way. So many minor nations fall into this category because they don't have any specific rules that benefit that nation, right? And especially there's a point where nation meets build meets player, and that can be off. So if you have a minor nation and you build the right build, the build that can actually work within minor nation, well, you might be good. You might do well, and things are perfect. But if you're ignoring the builds that are good with that nation, you're gonna struggle. Typically, in level 1 lists, you also see a bad choice of veterancy. So you might see veteran tanks, a veteran Puma again. Um, Sorry, not Puma, veteran Panther again. Um, why would you buy that veteran? It gives you a little bit more morale, but there's no reason to do it otherwise. Um, so you pick the wrong things for your units, and that is because typically you don't know what's good in the game. We also see bad lists being low on order dice. So immediately when I spot a list that is 10 or below in order dice at a 1,000-point game, I'll immediately go here and think, well, is this a level 1 list? Because if you're below 10, you're going to struggle most of the time. And if you haven't figured that out yet, then that list might also have a lot of other of these qualities. And typically, it has a lot of choices that are a bad point for value choice. So yeah, that is the bad lists. Then we have the level 2, the non-competitive list. The twos are lists that you'll see in many casual games. They are not lists designed to win. They are not lists designed to do anything especially good. So they will have suboptimal units. They will have some units that are just there because the player likes them, because they're historical, because he has that model. They will have non-optimized unit sizes. So full strength units of veterans, for instance. where there is no concession to min-maxing of the unit, and it doesn't even matter to the player whether or not the unit has a specific purpose. He just builds a certain size because he likes that size, or he has that number of models. It often has non-optimized equipment choices as well. This is where we see the LMGs being bought for infantry units. Maybe even you'll see fixed MMG teams, small teams, right? Not small teams, 3-man teams of MMGs, not optimal units, and it will still be low on order dice. So the non-competitive lists are typically 11 to 13 in that range of order dice, although they can have other ranges as well, depending on your nation. Many of these non-competitive lists are some of the not so good, competitively not so good nations. So many German lists are twos when I see them at tournaments, and that may be because the player is newer, or it's a casual player, and they just want to bring what they have in their collection for this nation that they love. 3 is sort of the standard for competitive play. This is what we see in most tournaments where the player has actually realized that this is a tournament that they want to win some games. So it has a mix of units, although many of them will typically be skirmish type units. Not necessarily, it can be other stuff, but so your typical American list I would rate as a 3 most of the time, right? Skirmishers, riflemen, pretty good, can do the work. I also rate, and this is where the style of play is not really covered well here. Many of the mixed bag type of builds for lists I would rate as 3s, 3.5s maybe. That is because I'm not typically a mixed bag player myself, although I know other players who are really good at it. And the current ruling world champion did bring sort of mixed bag ideas. So you can go there. However, for the 3s, the mix of units are not necessarily min-maxed. All of them. You can max out more. You can get more value for points out of your list. So there will be some not optimized choices. Not many, but maybe 1 or 2. They will be mid to low on order dice, so they will be typically in the 14 to 12 range of order dice, and will not bring many overpowered units, engineers, Gurkhas, Japanese cavalry, Polish lancers, Darker Stewards. They'll bring some, but not many. And they'll typically not be spamming units either, going back to what I said about the mixed bag build. Now these I would rate as 3s. They want to win games. They have a feeling like if they bring a lot of different stuff, they can sort of take on any opponent in any situation ish a little bit, have a little bit of everything. The 4s, the good, they are not doing that. What I'm seeing. For me, the 4 lists, they use good units with dedicated roles, specialized roles for each unit. So each unit has a specialized role and it's equipped for that specialized role. We don't see general units that can do multiple things in 4s. Not for me anyway. They will typically also be optimized in unit size, so there will be a min-maxing going on, and in veterancy as well. So the veterans will be where they need to go in the infantry section, maybe some in some of the small teams. The vehicles will typically be regulars, And if you're running large units, then they will be inexperienced. They will be mid to high in order dice, most of these lists. So they will be in the 14 to 16 range, many of them. And they will have overpowered units, not in full strength size, but in the correct size for this overpowered unit. So you can have full strength units if you're running bamboo spear fighters, for instance. But typically you'll just see like 8-man veterans, 6-man veterans if they are skirmishers. You'll see Polish lancers in 6-man size. So those kinds of optimized sizes of overpowered units. Those will be the fours, the good lists. These lists can and do win tournaments. And in the hands of good players are definitely viewing for the top placements. The fives, they are the ugly lists. They are lists that I don't see quite often. I mean, if we go back, the ones I would definitely want to face those at a tournament because I would be absolutely certain that I could beat them. The twos, yes, I will want them as well. Although I can be surprised and a good player can compensate. The threes, I'm going to take like a little bit of time studying these lists because they are the ones that can threaten me. So I'm going to think before I just rush in. The fours, I'm going to definitely try and study. I'm going to really try and figure out what this list wants to do. How do I beat that? Because these are really dangerous. The fives, they are the lists that I do not want to face at a tournament when I go to a tournament. The fives are the ugly lists, the lists that really are optimized for beating the opponent into smithereens. They only used overpowered and optimized units. There is no concession to taste. It's only the winning that matters. What some people call waka, win at all costs. They have optimized veterancy all across the board. They have optimized equipment all across the board. They only buy the equipment that they need. They have optimized nations as well. They don't care what nation they're playing with. They play with a nation that gives them the bonus that they like, that they feel like is going to win them games. It will have high mid OD, which means that they typically, for me, they won't be very high in order dice. They'll be around 14 to 15 order dice in 1,000 points list. And they'll have a very clear build. These players who build fiver lists, they know what they want. They know exactly what they want. They know the build that they want to build and they know how to get it. And as soon as I see a fiver list, I'm feeling like I couldn't improve this. I, I, I would want to build this. This is what I would want to bring to a tournament, but I could not improve it. I couldn't make this better in any way. The fours, I sometimes feel like maybe I would do this differently a little bit. The threes, I definitely know what I would do differently, right? But the fives, no, they are just the best that I could possibly think of for this nation and for this build. And I'm genuinely scared of this list. That is the fives. So that is my 1 to 5 list build. I hope you find this useful. Please enjoy your Christmas holidays and I will see you. Cheers.